field and the knower of the field. Let's see if I can do this without. All right. Sorry about that. Can you all hear me in Zoom land?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. So 13th chapter, field and knower of the field. One of the most important chapters. And what this does, it introduces us to the Vedantic meditation of subject-object discrimination. Drishya viveka, the discrimination between the seer and the seen, between the self and the not self, between the noumenon and the phenomena, between the self and the not self. So we have started to go through what are the elements of the not self. Now, this is a very direct meditation. And the thing we want to always understand is it does us no good to objectify the self out there. Well, what do you think about the self, Anand? Well, this is what I think about the self, as if we're talking about something that's a third party. Always, when we are investigating the self, we start with our direct experience. Who sees the phone? I do. That's yourself. You are already experiencing the self. The problem is, because of spiritual ignorance, I've superimposed upon the self the qualities of the not self. Mainly, I think, on my body. Would you flip that switch for me, please? Sure. So, what is the field? Kshetra, the not self, the entire world of objects, the entire world of feelings, the entire world of thoughts, my body, my senses, energy, any meditative experience. Oh, Jim, everything's getting expansive. Is expansive now? No. Who was aware of the expansive feeling? I was. Who's experiencing the ordinary mind? I am. That's yourself. Understand, yourself can never be known as an object. You were not going to be in meditation and go, aha, that's the self. No, does not happen like that. Does not happen like that. You already are experiencing the self. When are you ever not you? My problem is I'm confused about it. Ignorance is in my mind. And you will never see yourself as an object. Yourself is that by which everything is known. But itself could never be known as an object. Well, does that mean the self is unknowable? Well, it's unknowable and knowable. It is unknowable as an object, as an experience. Yet you know you are you. Everything in the world of phenomena is known by what we call the triple P, the triple factor, knower, knowing, and known. For example, I, through seeing, cognize the candle, object of knowledge. I, through hearing, cognize the sound of the traffic. We go through the whole 5 outer senses. I, through manas, mind, know feelings, judgments. I, through buddhi, intellect, know thoughts, images, memories. How do you know you? You do not see, hear, taste, touch, or smell, or mold, or think yourself. Oh, I must not exist. Well, who knows that thought? I don't exist. Well, I do. How do you know you are you? And the self is its own means of knowledge. Swayambhu, self-evident. Swayamjyoti, self-luminous. No one lacks the experience of the self, just my confused mind. That's what needs to be changed. First, we have what's called paroksha jnana, indirect knowledge. You get the indirect knowledge from scripture, from the teachings of the Guru. So you understand it. Then in meditation, I practice this meditation called neti neti, this. Anything arises, that's not it. Let it go. Auspicious moment when through this renunciation, this vairagya, the mind is vishuddha, made very pure, made sattvic. In the space between my thoughts, with my attention focused on the self, I see there's nothing there. No thing. Chidakash, the space of consciousness itself. Yet it shines as chit, pure awareness. It is Sat. So here, Krishna is giving us a list, an examination of the not-self. And we got halfway through it. Swamiji here links verses 6 and 7 together. So will you read 6 in English and then chant 7 in the Sanskrit and read that for us, please?
6 in English and 7 in Sanskrit?
Yeah.
Okay. So verse 6 is the great elements, egoism, intellect, and also the unmanifested Mula Prakriti, the 10 senses and the 1 mind, and the 5 objects of the senses.
All right, and now going through the list, number 7, please.
Ichha dvesha sukham dukkham Sangataschetana dhritihi etat kshetram samasena Savikara mudahritam. Desire, hatred, pleasure, pain, aggregate body, intelligence, fortitude. This kshetra has been thus briefly described with its modifications.
So when he says desire and hatred, this is an indication of the entire range of our feelings. It means desire, it means hatred, it means boredom, it means enthusiasm, it means all our various feelings. What was the next idea? Desire and hatred?
Pleasure, pain.
Yes. So these are the mind's reactions to conducive and non-conducive environments. Based on the force of the past, I decide this particular environment is conducive. That makes me happy. And if it goes away, I'm happy. Or if I get an environment that has all the stuff I don't like, it's all the mind does. That's all not self. I am not my thoughts, not my feelings. Next idea?
The aggregate body.
Yes. So the aggregate, what is the aggregate body? So you have the gross body, stula sharira. We've also called it the annamaya kosha, the food tube, the food sheath. It consumes a mountain of food and produces a mountain of poop. You are munching your way to the grave. That's what your body is doing. That's what your body does. The food sheath. Anam means cooked rice in Sanskrit. The next level is the Pranamaya kosha, the energy body, with the Panchavayu, the 5 vital airs. So it's inhalation, exhalation and elimination, circulation, digestion, and udana, thinking. Sometimes I feel a lot of energy. Sometimes I do. So some of you have gotten involved in energy work. There's a whole science of energy and developing and moving energy in the body. We call it pranayama. People think, oh, energy's moving around. But here Krishna is saying, not self. Manumaya Pusha, the mental sheath. Oh, this is wonderful. The mind is the world, and the world is the mind. It is the mind that creates our experience of the world. Judgments, evaluations, the quality of things. All of that is not self. I know. Vijnanamaya kosha, the intellectual sheath, which is comprised of the organs of perception, data in, buddhi, intellect, and ahankara. Egoism is a function in the Vijnanamaya kosha. What is ahankara? Did we talk about this last week? Yes or no?
Yeah.
Okay, let's review it because it's incredibly important. Aham is the first person pronoun in Sanskrit, which just means I. Kara comes from the root kri, to make or to do. So ahankara means thoughts that make my sense of I'm tall, I'm short, I'm good, I'm bad. You can get very subtle. So a friend criticizes you. Oh, I feel terrible, makes me have low self-esteem. All of that is ahankara. Now, ahankara is an object of awareness. Was it this class where we had everybody look at Fang?
Yes.
Okay.
Let's do it again.
So everybody look at them. Yeah.
Oh, no.
Has she put on weight?
Oh,
Has she
yes.
lost weight? Does she have her dinner on her blouse? How does that make you feel?
Feel like it's all true.
Or does it make you feel self-conscious?
Yes.
Yes. Or so Anand is a musician. So when you're totally in the zone and making music, either with your tablas or your sitar, ego thins. Or you're watching a movie or listening to music or making love. Thins. There's no personal sense of self there. So you watch it thicken and thin. It is an object of awareness. Listen very carefully. The essence of ahamkriti, the ego sense, is it makes me feel like a person, an individual. Some scriptures will use the term the jivatma, the individual soul. I don't like to use that phrase. I prefer to use the phrase that Gaudapada uses, which is jiva bhavana. Bhavana means an attitude or a feeling. Now, it's just not just an opinion. It's almost like hypnosis. So, for example, you have a kind of jiva bhavana in the dream state. Now, I'm 73, I'm going to be 74 this year. I'm fat. I don't have a calf muscle on my left foot. My eyes don't work anymore. Body's pretty decrepit. Not in my dreams. I was driving in my dream last night. Getting out of the car, running around. So that's another kind of ahankara. It was my imagination, my mind that created a dream body and then identified with it. This is no different. And the subtlest part of the aggregate body, the Anandamaya Kosha, the Bliss Sheath. This is also called the Avyaktaha, the unmanifest. So carefully
Participation.
Were you able to hear the explanation of egoism, the ahankara?
Yes.
Okay, so now we will move on to the Anandamaya Kosha, the Bliss Sheath, which is also known as the unmanifest of Yaktaha. It's also my bundle of vasanas. It is also avidya, ignorance. So, what is a vasana? A vasana is an impression left in the unconscious as the result of a previously formed egoistic action. So when I have I-ness and minus in my activity, it leaves an impression. Oh, that was really good. Or that was terrible. I never want to do that again. And Shankara uses the metaphor of the silkworm spinning a cocoon. One thread and then another thread, another vasana and another vasana. And this cocoons my mind, my understanding. And when my mind is under the influence of vasana, I have what's called avarana shakti, which means veiling power, the non-apprehension of myself. I do not know that I am Brahman. Then vasanas have a second power called vikshepa shakti, projecting power. It projects the individual ego. Now, this becomes easy to understand if we go to the dream state. Much of the same process happens there. So I go to bed, and the first thing that happens is I go to sleep, which is the non-apprehension of myself as the waker. Then what happens? Vikshepa Shakti, the mind projects. A dream world populated by dream people with a dream body, and a dream ego identified with it. And to the dreamer, that seems very real. I only figure out that it's not real when I wake up. It's negated, refuted, it's gone. So, in this world, I am spiritually asleep because of vasana. And the mind projects jiva bhavana. I feel like I'm a person, an individual. Mostly I'm identified as my body. My body plus the personality. Now, that's what vasana is. You can't see a vasana. You can only infer a vasana by its effects. So, for example, Anand here is a cook and he's a musician. Are you a cook and a musician?
No.
Nope. But if you were sound asleep, you'd just be, and if he were sound asleep, what's your experience of deep sleep? I know nothing. Well, I must have known nothing. You can't even do it in present time, only from memory. But your mind's not gone. Your mind is folded up into its seed form. Now, why do we call it the bliss sheath? Because when the vikshepa shakti, the projecting power, which can also be termed our longing, our wanting, our desiring, our craving, when that stops for a moment, I get a taste of the bliss of my own self-nature. But because my mind's in ignorance, I don't know it, and I attribute it to the object. So everybody experiences the Anandamaya kosha in two ways. First, with the satisfaction of the desire. Let the stone be the stand-in for whatever it is you want. The desire and object of desire become one. Oh, that was a great widget. And it can be drugs, sex, and rock and roll. It can be my career. It can be my partnership. It could be my family. It could be whatever it is that I think has the power to make me happy. But what I'm really doing is using the object to stop my mind, to stop the jonesing of my mind. The more I want it, and the more completely it fulfills my expectation when I get it, the happier I am. Now, we experience the Anandamaya kosha at another time. Deep sleep. Everybody loves deep sleep. What object causes the happiness of deep sleep? And the more your life sucks, the more you're not getting what you want, the more we want deep sleep. Many of us may have had the experience. I've got stress in my life. I've got anxiety in my life, and I can't sleep. Who's had that experience? That can be torturous. Now, there's a state called Vasanananda. This is when the mind has just awakened from deep sleep, but has yet to engage with the world. I call it snooze alarm bliss. So you're lying in bed, you're sound asleep. Beep, 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 beep. Beep, 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 beep. Beep, 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 beep. You know, oh, just another 10 minutes. Just another 10 minutes. You roll over and you put your pillow and you go, oh, that feels so good. You're just on the edge of deep sleep, but you're awake enough to enjoy it. You know that state?
Mhm.
What's the object that's making you feel so good? Nothing. Your mind's right on the edge of the Anandamaya kosha. So this is my ignorance. Shankara says it is the annihilation of the vasanas here and now that is considered liberation by the wise. We'll get into that. So there's a practice that's implied in this particular part of the teaching. You are to watch your mind. We're back to Sakshi Bhav again, witnessing. Notice what it feels like when you're not getting what you want. Usually it shows up in three ways. I either want something I don't have, or I want to get rid of something I don't like, or what I call the neurotic form. I have what I want, but I'm afraid I'm going to lose it. Then we're like a person at a banquet, the thorn in their throat. You can't enjoy what you have because you're full of fear. See if you can identify that it's the craving itself that makes me feel so bad. Then own your bliss. Watch your mind. when desire and object of desire become one, when you do get what you want, pay attention to it. You mean ice cream and a raise at work and good sex all do the same thing to my mind? Yes. It will vary in intensity and it will vary in duration, depending on how much I wanted it and how fully it fulfilled my little recipe card. But pay attention to it. Don't be unconscious about it. Own your own bliss. It's not in the people, places, things, and conditions. It's a taste of your own self-nature. Then it's Atmaramana, not Ananda Maya Kosha. Reveling in yourself, not being deluded in the dance with the objects. So that whole aggregate from the gross body, the food tube, all the way up to the causal body. That's what we also call the Ananda Maya Kosha. That aggregate is all not self. So we've gone through in these two verses a brief explanation, all the elements of the not self. If it's an object in the physical world, if it's your body, if it's an emotion, if it's a thought, if it's energy, if it has a beginning and an end, if it's subject to change, if it has qualities or characteristics, and most importantly, if it can be known as an object of cognition, drop it. That's not it. Any questions about this?
What's the relationship between the self and the Anandamaya Kosha? Like, is
Good
bliss-
question.
Yeah.
Good question. So we have these three words that don't define, they indicate the self. Sat, Chit, Ananda. Remember those?
Yes.
So if the self is constant and you're experiencing the self all the time, you're experiencing Ananda all the time. Well, that can't be true. My life sucks. So what I think Ananda is can't be my romantic idea. I want to experience Ananda. That isn't it. So we start by defining Ananda as no sorrow reaches there. Physical pain gets as far as my body. Emotional suffering gets as far as my mind. Doubt and confusion get as far as my intellect. But none of it touches me. I'm that still point. Let the hurricane go around me. Well, then why do we call it Ananda? And as we examine the teaching on the Anandamaya Kosha, what is it that makes the mind happy? When the mind is extroverted, when it's jonesing, when it's wanting, we have the word dhamma, desire. It's not strong enough in my opinion. I choose to translate it as craving. Spriha. vanja. I actually think we get the English word want from that one. It means wanting, wanting, wanting. What does it feel like when the mind's in that state, Trevor?
It's like
Hmm?
you're going around in circles.
That is your suffering. Can you find any other suffering other than wanting something you don't have or wanting to get rid of something you don't like? Yeah,
Covers all of it.
that's it. Now, physical pain, okay, we can beg the question there, just put that on the shelf. But very few people want to blow their brains out because their toes hurt. Actually, human beings are incredibly able to deal with physical pain. It's amazing. It's my suffering that makes me hate life, hate my life. So this jonesing, this craving, this wanting is this extroversion of the mind. This is rajas, if you want to talk about it from the standpoint of the Buddhists. It's an element of the vikshepa shakti, the projecting power of the mind. And it sucks when the mind comes back home to the self, because the self is bliss absolute. The mind becomes blissful. It is my mind that has the problem. Now listen carefully. Both bondage and liberation occur to the mind. The self is ever free. Your self does not get enlightened. It's the mind. It's the mind that has the problem. One of the big doubts of the mind is, where the heck is happiness? Oh, they fooled me. It's not out there. It's when the mind can come home to the self. That's the meaning of yoga. Yoga means to join, to yoke. When a person's mind is yoked to the self, they're in yoga. People get tastes of that mind coming home in ignorance when you satisfy a desire and when you go to sleep. But the yogi wants to consciously bring the mind home. There are mediated experiences of the bliss of the self. When I satisfy a desire. Problem is, the world's pretty little. It's 95 cents worth of work for a nickel's worth of joy. But the yogi also cultivates a non-mediated experience of the bliss of our self-nature. Did that make it a little clearer?
Yeah.
It not only is that an excellent question, that is the question. Self-realization gives us two things. The first is it frees us from what I call existential fear. Nothing can touch you. There's nothing to be afraid of. It's all going to work out. It's all going to be okay. You don't need anything in order to be happy. And I finally have found out where happiness is. It's not out there. It's a lie. I know you two have a background in Christian thought. One of the things that St. Augustine says, I love it. It's one of his favorite sayings, my favorite sayings, his sayings that are favorite to me. Thou hast made us for thyself, O Lord. And our heart is restless until it finds its rest in thee. Some people talk about the God-shaped hole in our hearts. And we run around for lifetimes. What's the country western song? Looking for love in all the wrong places. That's our life. What I'm looking for, I'm looking with. It's myself. Stupid. Oh. So simple in the end. Come home. Swamiji was so empty. You had the capacity to surrender and just tune up to you. So he could show us the awakened state of mind. Say, meet me there. Hurry home. Hari Om. Love to play with words. Any questions on this?
Jim, I'm curious if the mediated experience and the non-mediated experience ends up taking you to the same place.
Yes and no. There's a discussion among the big mucky mucks. Is samadhi necessary for self-realization? Some scholars say no. Shankara certainly said yes, if you look at Viveka Chudamani. Swamiji taught that it does. And the reason is this. You may intellectually know that yourself is bliss, and that the bliss you experience through the objects is just the bliss of yourself. But in practice, if that's the only way you get juice, you're going to be attached to the objects. Now, what's the truth about all the objects? They have a beginning and an end. If they don't change, your mind certainly does. The first chocolate, yummy, 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 yummy. After I've eaten a pound of chocolate, the food gives you joy, but then you're fat. Stock market goes up, stock market goes down. Eli, what's cryptocurrency doing now?
Yeah, up and down.
Yeah, is it down now or up now?
Bitcoin's like 40,000 from 50,000.
Is that, I don't know, is that up or down?
Down.
Down. So if you're, that's where I get my fun, my joy. Too bad. I'm in love. Well, let me tell you the truth about love. All relationships are temporary. They all end in death or divorce. Think. I was talking with a student. She's really distraught. She got dumped. How long have you been with this fellow? Oh, it was a long-term relationship, 3 months. And I'm working with a woman whose husband died of COVID. They were married 42 years. You have no idea what suffering is. So the point is, if the only way we get juice is through the world. It's up to you. So this is why meditate, meditate, meditate. It is in meditation when you get those moments when everything is still and stops. And it's clean. It's so pure. No object is causing it. That's what proves to the mind. Yeah, there's joy in the world. Nobody says that chocolate doesn't taste good. But it's little. Krishna, I think it was, I can't remember which chapter, that to the woman of knowledge, the pleasures of the world is like the drop held on a piece of grass poured into the ocean. It's just little. Did that answer your question?
Yes. Thank
Now, but meditation's hard and I don't feel like doing it. And I'd rather be out there accomplishing stuff in the world. Is that wrong or bad? No. It just means that your mind still has a lot of vasana pressure. That's all. So what do? You got to be humble enough to take on the practice that's appropriate for where our minds are. Look at chapters 3, 4, and 5 of Gita. That'll tell you what to do. All right, so that's 6 and 7. Number 8. Did we lose Niamh? Did she leave?
you. Might have been in the bathroom.
Okay.
Amanitva madambitva mahimsa kshantirarjavam acharyopasanam shaucham sthairyamatma vinigraha. Humility, unpretentiousness, non-injury, forgiveness, uprightness, service to the teacher, purity, steadfastness, self-control.
Go do the next one along with it then.
Okay. Indriyartheshu vairagya manahamkara evacha janma mrityu jara vyadhi dukkha doshanu darshanam. Indifference to the objects of the senses and also absence of egoism, perception of, reflection upon evils in birth, death, old age, sickness, and pain. ...
So what he's talking about here, all of these, by the way, are also not self. But these are the practices to take on which help us cultivate purity of mind. This is the qualifications of a fit student. These are the yamas and niyamas, just a different form. So let's look at them one by one. Go back to number 8, the first one.
Humility.
Yes. What is the definition of humility? Humility is not thinking less of yourself. Humility is thinking of yourself less. Ego either wants to be just a little bit better than everybody else, or gets into the kind of that sick pleasure of self-pity. I'm worse than everybody else. You'd be surprised how many of us are people with low self-esteem who think we're the center of the world. I'm the piece of poop the world revolves around. chances are, frankly, you're not important to most people. Ego's most difficult place to locate is just being a worker among worker, a fellow among fellows. At the level of the equipment, just being a human being. Oftentimes when people start going on and on and on about the Dalai Lama, anybody know how he responds to that? I'm just a monk doing his practices. Just be a yogi doing your practices. But yoga is not a path of self-improvement. It is a path of self-abandonment. It's a path of self-forgetting the little self. This is humility. Now, there's a practical way of being in the world. My suggestion is do not try to be spiritual. What? If your idea of spirituality is an attempt to superimpose being a goody-goody on top of the monster you think you are, most of us have a persona that we present to the world. Actually, the word persona, personality, comes from the Greek. What was it for? For sound. The masks you saw in the Greek and Roman tragedies and comedies with the comedy and tragedy masks was to amplify the voice. That's what they were for. So we have this mask that we present to the world. Why? Because if people really knew who I was, they'd run. I'm a terrible person. So I have to present this goody-goody mask. Is this making sense to people? The fascinating thing is when we start to tell the truth about the monster we think we are, it starts to dissolve. And beneath that is a not self-absorbed, free person. It's like watching a child playing. They're not self-conscious at all. Do you understand what I mean? That's humility. Now, if you have had a friend and they unburden their heart and they tell you about all these things that are going on in their minds and stuff like that, if your response is like mine, we don't run from people like that. We usually love them. We're honored that they would be so honest and share themselves with us. Isn't that your experience?
Yes.
Yes. So it's a paradox. So what we need to do is be willing to tell the truth about what we call our kleshas. Who knows what that word means?
Afflictions.
Afflictions, yes, or doshas, or defects of character. You have to admit to yourself, yeah, I'm selfish, I'm greedy, I'm dishonest, I lie, I try to impress people. I'm an attention whore. I want everybody to pay attention to me. And these sound familiar? Yeah. Once you know your own mind, you know the human condition. Frequently, people will say, "Oh, Jim, do you read our minds? Are you psychic?" No, but I know my own mind. And it's no different than yours. Swamiji used to say, the mind is a sewer. The context of a sewer is clear running water with poop in it. It's our minds. But you are not your mind. So our first real demonstration of the abandonment of this personal sense of self is to give up the facade of trying to look good. One of my favorite slogans, you can't save your face and your ass at the same time. Save your ass. Ways in which you might be able to become more aware of your kleshas, your doshas. Journaling. Meditation. Be aware of them. Without, oh, I'm so terrible. I'm such a piece of, I'm so bad. That's the kind of sick joy of self-pity. That's egoism. I'm worse than anybody. You're not. You have a human mind. Caught up in ignorance. So this is humility. Any thoughts on this? Do not try to be spiritual. Strive for authenticity. Now, this is not a license for bad behavior. You may go home and say, oh, I'm so angry at so-and-so. I feel so hurt. You tell the truth to yourself. That doesn't mean go punch them. You see the difference? Doesn't mean engage in bad behavior. It means being honest with yourself. So in Shankara's Vivekachudamani, as he's setting up the preparatory stuff for the qualifications of a fit student, he says, who has a knowledge of the world outside and an understanding of the world inside. Meaning you've done some work. Some work on your own psychology. This is humility. This is our first demonstration of our willingness to abandon ego, is to have honesty at the level of the personality. Any thoughts on this?
Jim, I didn't hear your last few words.
This is this willingness to take a look at our own issues is
Okay.
our first demonstration of abandoning egoism, abandoning our identity, our identification with the personal sense of self. Now, Shweta, this doesn't mean that, to use the boxing term, you lead with the chin at work. You don't want to walk into a business meeting and then start, doing compulsive disclosure on all your character defects.
Yeah.
That's not appropriate. But with your husband, with a good friend, with your journal, the Catholics for centuries have had the sacrament of confession. Its initial purpose was to do this. It started in Ireland with the monks in Ireland. When the Roman Empire fell, Christianity stayed active in Ireland. And these monks would have what they called an amicus alma. Anybody here know their Latin?
Amicus is friend.
Hmm?
Amicus is friend. And
Alma?
alma means soul.
Soul, a friend of my soul. Yes. That's what, and before the church ever made confession sacrament, with all the 5 Hail Marys and 5 Our Fathers, it became like, paying off a traffic ticket after a while. But that's not what the origin was. It was a friend of your soul. Okay, that's humility. Any other thoughts on humility before we move on? Next one, next idea.
Unpretentiousness.
Oh yes, this idea of being natural. Not having any idea about being puffed up because of this. It's very funny. And sometimes we have to do things like that. One of the things that I think is fascinating, I have friends who are in the corporate world, and every year they get a review on their work. And one of the things that happens is you have to review yourself, self-evaluation on your work. Who's had to go through that process? And so if you're modest, well, no, you don't get a raise. It's like sets you up for pretentiousness. It's very weird practice. But you have a good view of what your strengths and challenges are. And you are none of them. All right, one more and then we'll quit.
Non-injury.
Ahimsa, non-injury. The exoteric meaning is don't hurt people. Doesn't mean just fighting. Do you respond to hurts and slights with a desire for redress or revenge? Now, one of the most injurious ways that we fail to practice non-injury is when we engage in abusive self-talk. Oh, Jim, that was stupid. How could you have done that? Oh God, you're such an idiot. Does any of you have a voice like that in your head? To run that voice is not to practice ahimsa. Bing. Bing. So it's not only non-injury of others. If I had ever seen anyone in my 45, 47 years of teaching get spiritual value from beating themselves up, I might recommend it. But I can say in all those decades, I have never seen it be useful for people. All right, we'll have to take up the rest of the list next week.
I still have a question for that one.
Yes,
but
ma'am.
I can ask next time if you want.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I've noticed some people do the opposite of ahimsa in the sense, have you heard the saying like, I will show you? Like someone says something to them and they're like, you just motivated me to like do something to almost challenge that. I find that like,
Give me an
interesting.
example. I'm not sure I understand what you're saying.
like someone will say, you're never going to be a math teacher, you're terrible at math. And then the kid says to themselves, and maybe over time an adult would say to themselves, I'll show you, I can do it, right? Like it's almost like not coming from a place of love or creativity, it's coming from a place of like
Spite, yeah.
spite. So I feel like that is also not injury, isn't it?
Well, you figure that out. If it's a way for a child to not believe the negative talk of another, then it can be useful.
What about an older person?
Whatever.
Mm.
If it's about, I can't wait till I get the day and come up to you and say, I am now the owner of my own business. See, if that's where you're going, that's not what we're talking about. Let's see.
Jim, may I add something to this?
Please.
So I feel that it's a lower stage. I mean, it is indeed contradicting ahimsa, but there is a higher form of ahimsa. But this, like you said, is something that can be useful at a certain stage. And maybe once one crosses that stage, then one can even let go of this feeling of I'll show you.
Yes, I agree with you. I agree with you. And as adults, as teachers, as managers, humiliation is a lousy way to motivate anybody. So you know what it's like to feel like you've been hurt or attacked and stuff like that. Even if the response is anger and I'll show you. But don't you do it to anybody else. All right, we'll stop here. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Sri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om. Oh, that's it. Thank you all.
Thank you, Jim.
Sorry about our technical problems. Thank you, Deepa, for finding a solution.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Let me test for you if your internet is working, Jim.